This week we're going to have a look at how to animate in Krita. We'll see how to use the timeline docker, enable onion skinning, and draw using straight ahead animation. So I'm going to create a new file, choose the predefined A4 setting, change the orientation to horizontal, and I'm going to drop the dots per inch down to 150 from 300. For content, I'm going to give my file a name called Animation Practice. Make sure it has 2 layers. I like to start with 2 layers and hit create. Also be sure to save your file regularly. Any graphics program is going to cause a little bit of wear and tear on a computer. So I'm just going to go to my week 2 folder and quickly save this as animation practice. This week I also made a few interface changes. Since I'm done playing with the brushes, I parked them over here where the layers were, and I brought my layers out. I'm also going to show another docker called the animation timeline, and that's going to show up on the bottom here and give us control of our animation. You should use whatever workspace works best for you. If you do make your own and you want to make changes though, and you want to save those changes, you can just come in here and use the exact same name, and then this will change to overwrite, and now I can just save this, and now my new workspace is my new workspace. But Krita does have an animation workspace if you want to just try that out and start there as well. So get comfortable in your own workspace. So let's take a look at how to animate. I'm going to choose my brush tool. I've chosen an ink brush so I can get some nice clean edges, sharp edges. And I've also picked kind of a darker color to draw with this week. And I set the brush size to 40. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just draw a circle or a dot somewhere on my canvas. I'm going to draw it on the left because I'm going to move it to the right as I keep drawing. Okay. Down here on the timeline, you can see this little orange area that's selected. This represents my current frame. So if I go to the next frame and click this icon, this is insert a blank keyframe, you'll see that this first frame turned blue, which indicates there's something drawn on it. The second frame turned has like a slash pattern on it, like it's textured out. This means that there's a blank keyframe there. So now, if I enable onion skinning by clicking this little light bulb right here, I can see where the dot was. And if I draw a dot next to it and scroll the playhead back and forth, you can see my dot moves. And if I turn onion skinning off, you can see I have a little animation here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next frame, hit insert blank keyframe, make sure onion skinning is still on, and draw another dot. Now to make this much faster, depending on your device or what you're using, there's something called auto key. Auto key can be adjusted in your timeline menu down here on the bottom right, and you see it's this little icon right here that can either be disabled, now it has an X on it, or it can be enabled, which doesn't have the X on it. And there's 2 choices: to create a blank keyframe, which is what we're doing right now, or to duplicate the keyframe. That means just make a new frame with the dot that we drew last already in it. So like copy the last keyframe. In this case, we're going to create blank ones. And let's make sure that's enabled, so there shouldn't be an X on the icon. And if I come back out, instead of having to click this little button every time, I just go to the next frame and I draw my dot, and it automatically creates the frame for me. Okay, even faster is if I use my right arrow on the keyboard. I can now go to the next frame and draw a dot. And watch how fast you can just get going. Right arrow, draw a dot with auto key. Right arrow, draw a dot with auto key. And you'll see on the bottom, each time I do this, it's creating those little blank keyframes for me, so I don't have to click the button every time. And that's 24 frames, or 1 second. So if we'd like to see this now, we can do a few things. We can manually scroll the playhead back and forth and watch it animate. If you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can scroll the wheel back and forth. You can turn onion skinning off to see the animation better. Okay, you can hit play, but play is going to play all the extra stuff at the end too. So what you can do is also, you can just drag and select what you want to play, and then hit the play button, and it will loop that back. Another trick I notice in here sometimes is my speed accidentally changes. Like for instance, if I have my mouse over the speed bar here and I just scroll by accident, you'll see it changes quickly. If I go to 200%, it'll actually play my animation back way too fast. Okay, so watch your speed here. Just double check that from time to time. If it looks like things are going too quickly, just make sure your speed's at 100%. All right, let's create a new layer, and I'm gonna call this one dot 2. And I guess I'm gonna call the first one dot 1. And I'm gonna make sure I've got dot 2 selected. In fact, I'm gonna lock dot 1 to make sure I can't draw on it. And you'll see down here, we have dot 2 just shows up in the animation timeline. And if I go back to the first frame here, in order to get auto key to work, I have to create a blank frame first. Once I do this, then I can draw and auto key will work. If you don't do that step first, auto key doesn't work, and that can kind of drive you mad for a minute. So using the same brush, I'm going to come over here and choose a different color now, maybe a blue this time. And I'm going to do the same thing, except this time, I'm going to see what happens if I make the ball move less distance each time. So if I go to the next frame here, you see the red ball moved. I'm going to put onion skinning on, and I'm going to move the blue ball just a little bit. So like it moves half the distance of the ball instead of the whole distance. So I'm going to do this for the whole time. Alright, and with that animated, I'm going to turn onion skinning off. I'm going to select all the frame area, and I'm going to hit play. And you can see that the second ball appears to move slower than the first one. So this is a very important concept. When the ball moves less distance each step, it will appear to move slower. So in the second case, the ball appears to move slower because it doesn't move as much distance each step. Okay, and we can certainly demonstrate this again by creating a third ball, dot 3. Select the green color this time. Gotta hit blank frame first, then draw, and now auto key works. So the second one here, what I want to do then is make it much farther out, like double the distance. And by the time we get to the end, we're actually off the screen. So if we play them all back now, you can see the green one speeds right off the screen. Now these last 3 dots moved at a constant rate. That's because they move the same distance every time. So what happens if we start the dot off moving very, very short distances, but we lengthen the amount of distance gradually over time? And the answer to that question is the ball appears to accelerate. So notice how the first 3 dots are moving at a constant rate, while the third one is appearing to speed up. And this is called slow in or slow out, or acceleration and deceleration. And for one more demonstration, we'll animate the ball going the other direction, where we start off with a rather lengthy first step and we slow the ball down over time. With this way of animating, or straight ahead animating, you might be noticing it's rather difficult to have the ball come out at a certain distance or at a certain time accurately. We're going to look more into this when we talk about pose to pose animating. So if all of your dots don't come out at the same time or go the same distance, that's perfectly fine. So having a look at the animations we made so far, if I go ahead and scroll back and forth, you can see each one sort of follows a different plan. So there's 2 vocabulary words I want to introduce us to this week. The first is timing. Timing has to do with when something stops and starts, or the frequency in which it happens. And we'll talk a lot more about timing in upcoming weeks. But the idea here is we're aiming, in this case, I aimed for 24 frames, which is 1 second at 24 frames per second. With straight ahead animation like this, it's very difficult to make the ball end up where it's supposed to be when it's supposed to be there. So for now, 24 is what I'm aiming for, but sometimes I got 22, sometimes I got 31. It doesn't really matter at this point. The other term I want to introduce us to is called spacing. And spacing has to do with how an object gets from one place to the other. In the first 3 examples, we saw the ball move at a constant rate. This means that it moved the same space each time, and it appears to move across the screen like a sun moving across the sky or a cloud floating by at a constant rate. These last 2, however, one accelerates and the other decelerates, and this is called ease in and ease out, or slow in and slow out. When animating something like a head turn, a constant rate motion just won't work. It looks too robotic and mechanical. It's much more natural if the head starts at a slow rate and speeds up as it turns. So we'll see how acceleration and deceleration play a role in animation in the next few weeks as well. These sketches that I made over my animations are referred to as timing charts, and we're going to have a much closer look at these when we get to pose animation as well. In this case, we used our animations to figure out the timing chart. With pose-to-pose animation, we're going to create the timing chart first and make sure our animation does the right thing. Alright, I hope that was helpful in terms of some of the techniques and theory that you'll need for this week. We'll head to some exercises next and see some ways to practice some of these ideas.